Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, listeners, and welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. You know, today my guest has fascinated me. Jamie Sussel Turner has been on a journey to live with less stress for the past 20 years. I know you were all going to change the channels and now everybody has stopped. Like you're leaning in like, hold on a second, I really need to be listening to this. And you're right. Even as she faced 3 experiences with cancer, she has navigated, believed, and led with a belief system of stress does not serve us. She has published 2 books, Less Stress, A Less Stress Life and Less Stress Business. Oh yeah, people sign this up. She lives in the belief that we each have the power to choose less stress life. Her results have been life-changing for herself, her readers, and of course, her clients. Today, Jamie is a New York Times and Forbes author. She is a speaker. She serves as a speaker coach for TEDxAsburyPark, the largest TEDx in the East Coast. And more than that, Jamie's background previously is she spent over a dozen years as a school principal. So let's talk about to a woman who is navigated stress in your life. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ivy, for having me and for that lovely introduction. It's great to talk with you.
Great to talk with you as well. So, you know, school principal is near and dear to my heart, having friends and family members who are school teachers, having raised my kids and them going to school and having the highest respect of the amount that's on a principal's plate. And for you leading this charge of looking at less stress, this is the, conclusion of the year of 2020, the year of stress.
Yes, I mean, we are all under more stress than ever before in this year. And actually, there's some data from the American Psychological Association that shows statistically that our stress is up, which isn't surprising with the pandemic and everything that we're all adapting to.
So what are you seeing in your day-to-day with your clients, with the numerous people you work with, all the lives that you touch, of what's, it's easy to say, oh, Ivy, well, there's the pandemic, but there's also the real specifics that people are living.
Right. It's the fallout and the impact of the pandemic. And I would say if I had to put a label on it, I would call it uncertainty. That as human beings, we do not sit well with uncertainty. And there is more uncertainty in our world right now than ever before. It's actually always been there, but it's really more apparent now. I mean, we don't know how long the pandemic will continue. We don't know when and if there will be a great vaccine for it. We don't know if our family members will get the virus, and if they do get it, how they'll manage with it, or if we'll get it ourselves. We don't know when we'll be back at work full time in person, if ever. Some, industries might not even be going back to work in person. So there's so many unknowns right now, and that ratchets up our stress considerably.
And then you kind of start adding this time of year, the holidays, and the impact of, and here's something I was thinking about. It's like, well, are these holidays going to be less stressful versus more stressful? Because we're not running around to holiday events. We're playing it more low key. But then there's also the stress of the missing, the missing the people, the missing the joy, the celebrations.
I love that question, Ivy, because I think what you've nailed there is that the pandemic isn't all bad. What I do to kind of hold on to my joy in life is I stay focused on what I still have, not what I've lost. So, for example, I haven't seen 4 of my grandchildren for a year now because they live in Toronto and the borders are still closed. And while that's really sad not to be able to hug them and be present with them and spend a lot of time with them, one of the good things that's happened is the two older granddaughters who are 8 and 11, they now are independent and they can FaceTime me whenever they want to, which didn't happen before the pandemic. So I'll be sitting having lunch and my iPad will start ringing. And I'm like, what is that noise? And then I realize it's my granddaughters calling me. So our relationship has, I'd say, maybe even gotten a little closer. So as we enter into the holiday season, you're absolutely right. It's going to be different. But instead of focusing on what we don't have, I'd say let's keep focused on what we do have and what maybe new traditions we could adopt that would be safe for us right now.
I love that. And that's, that's a growth mindset of when
Yes.
you're looking, right? When you're looking to say, I have, I speak about the 7 traits of great leadership, and it's on my website and there's videos on it and all this stuff. But one of the traits that always resonates with me is showing up with a what can I do attitude. And that has meant the
Yes.
world to me as a leader and in building businesses. And I'm hearing you say, take this time and look at those golden nuggets.
Right. And I think to add to what you're saying is to really think about what matters. And when I look back at past holiday seasons, I'll go back to when I was a school principal and my teachers were so stressed out around the holidays. I tell a story in my book, Less Stress Life, about a teacher who was so stressed because she had to go home and bake 8 different kinds of Christmas cookies one night. And I said, well, what if you only made 4 kinds of cookies? And she just looked at me like I had 2 heads. Because sometimes we really lose sight of what matters about the holidays. Is it the cookies? Is it having 8 different kinds of cookies? Or is it the time that we spend with our family members, whether it's in person or virtually, and how we find joy in our relationships? So I think just, remembering to stay focused on what really matters can be extremely helpful.
I think you're so spot on there. And it just brought back a memory to me when my kids were younger. And I remember maybe it was the weekend of Thanksgiving weekend or that following weekend, and where I would bake with the kids and we would bake cookies for their teachers and other people in our lives. And it wasn't about it was about the everybody looking forward to this day we'd spend together. Their grandmother, my mother, would come for the day, and it was a joyful day. If the cookies looked horrible, nobody cared.
Right. It wasn't about the cookies, which is what I say in the book. It's not about the cookies. And so I can hear from your great story that it was about the time of all of you being together. And so I encourage people, whoever's listening to this podcast, to really ask yourself when you're feeling stressed, and we all will feel it. It's not going to go away. Stress is ever present in our lives. But when we feel it, ask ourselves, what's really important about this moment? What do I care about? And that kind of helps us right ourselves and figure out what we want to stay focused on.
And, I think in innovative ways, I have seen a ton of online cooking classes in the way, and the same as and some friends of mine from across the country do this every other Friday baking thing, noon on Friday, every other week. It's what that same thing is. Well, if you want to make the cookies, great. What if we all did them virtually, and what if we all made that kind of concept of the traveling jeans, right? The
Yes,
birthday traveling jeans. And you mailed cookies forward, and you kind of came from a new innovative place, as opposed to it's sad we can't be doing this.
I love that idea. I think you should go public with that idea.
I just did.
I know. But I mean bigger. I think that's a great idea.
Jamie, should we bake cookies?
Yes, a virtual cookie exchange, that sends the cookies around the country. I love it.
So, looking at the stress of the holidays, the stress of business, and what you're seeing out there this year, how do you suggest some of us navigate the daily pressures of living in a new world every day here?
Well, it really depends on what your particular stress is around the new world. So, for example, if you're working remotely and you're missing your work colleagues, like I hear that from a lot of people that they just can't pop into someone's office and have a conversation with them and exchange ideas, and they're missing that camaraderie a lot. And in that case, I suggest that they, find a way to reach out and actually schedule conversations so you make sure they happen. I have two friends that lifelong friends that I have been closer with during this time because we've scheduled weekly Zoom calls or weekly FaceTime calls, and we talk every week, and it's been just amazing. We didn't do that before the pandemic. So, just to get in touch with whatever it is, that is challenging you right now. So there are all kinds of different things that challenge. One, I think the biggest challenge I've heard is clients who have young children who are doing school remotely, and the client is home trying to work while they're monitoring the children at school. And that, I remember when my kids were little and I would take them to like take your child to work day. I didn't get anything done that day. So, I can only imagine what it's like to try and work at home with young children at home. So, in that case, you really have to look for some new strategies, to figure out how to set some boundaries in the home, maybe enlist someone else who can help you, and really think outside the box creatively to how you can manage that better, because that's a challenging situation for sure.
And that's coming from a former school principal who's
Oh,
endorsed
yes.
what a challenging situation. And you're right. I'm hearing it with my own clients who are, some of them are young mothers and running businesses and having the kids homeschooled or remote schooled or whatever the various words are in various ways families are embracing it. Um, it I think it leads so many of us to do something that is one of the hardest things to do, and that's just ask for help.
Yes, that's so true. I love the way you just put that, because we feel that we should be doing it all ourselves. And, if we really get creative, there are people out there who want to help, and there are ways that they can help. Maybe a grandmother like myself, you can, when you have if you were a young mother and you had an important work call, put the child on FaceTime with the grandmother. The grandmother would be happy to help. So reach out
Yeah.
to people that you can reach out to. I love that idea.
Yeah, and just what you said is something I heard somebody doing is they schedule time between their child and their grandma
Right.
several times a week to read virtually.
Yes. Well, actually, that touches something that was really challenging for me during the pandemic. My son, his wife, and my, at the time, like 15-month-old grandson were stuck in Senegal in West Africa for 5 months at the beginning of the pandemic. They were there visiting her relatives.
And
And
I'm just going to say, so sorry to interrupt, but you obviously, clearly, not just in your bio, but this year has heightened levels of stress. So you're not just preaching at, you're living.
I am, but you know what? I'm really not that stressed about these things. These were
Yeah.
challenges, but I've gotten a grip on my stress. But yeah, but I definitely have had a lot of challenges. But during this time, I made, at my son's suggestion, I made videos of me reading a story to my grandson. And I made about 10 of them, and he would watch them over and over and over again. Fortunately, as a former school principal, I have a lot of children's books on my bookshelf. And when he came home after not seeing me for 5 months, for the first time ever, he calls me Nanny. That's the name of grandmothers in my family, and he's like, Nanny, Nanny, which he was more connected to me from the time away. I mean, it was really amazing. So yeah, you figure out what you can do, to stay in touch.
I love that. And I love the innovative thoughtfulness behind these ideas. So, share a little bit about what brought you to, from going from a principal to this line of work of becoming a coach, a writer, a speaker in this
Yeah.
way.
It's been a surprise to me, actually, Ivy. I was a lifelong educator, many, many decades before becoming a principal. And when I left that work in 2009, I thought I would retire. And I had heard about coaching a few years before that and actually gotten my coaching credential while I was still a principal. There was a grant from the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation for school principals to become coaches. And I jumped on that and I thought, okay, I'm going to be a coach in retirement. And originally I thought of it kind of like a hobby. And I did not expect things to be so successful, honestly. I've learned that I'm not a retired kind of person. Work is very important to me. It really fills me up. I need to feel like I have a purpose in the world and giving back to others and helping them grow. I think I'm a lifelong teacher at heart, actually, and I'm all about helping people grow. So I started the coaching business as like almost the day I left being a principal, and it was just amazing how it took off. I'm still surprised. And then writing 2 books was not on my radar. I was not one of those people who said, I always want to write a book. I'm sure you have friends like that and colleagues. I never was that person, but I started writing a blog. And then about 5 years after writing my blog, I looked at it one day and I said, I think I have enough here for a book. So my first book, Less Stress Business, came from the first 5 years of my blog, and I organized it in a way that made it cohesive as a book.
Um, I so agree with you. I swore I would never write a book. Swore I would never write a book. I don't need to do this. I don't need to prove any point or check any box. I've finished, 2 books are out there, third one on deck right now. And when it becomes less about you and more about the difference it makes to others.
Yes,
I
that's
think
what it's about. Absolutely. Yeah.
we rise to the occasion in leadership.
So you're on number 3. Good for you.
I don't know about that. It definitely. The funny story behind that is I swore at the beginning of this in January that I was not doing a book until the end of 2021, my next book. And then the pandemic and then a topic. And I was like, well, this has to be now. So
Yeah. You seized the moment, and it was an opportunity. I'd say at the beginning of the pandemic, you were asking earlier about what's changed for my clients. Some clients have really learned how to pivot their business to provide, what people need right now. And for me, the way that I have done that, I detested webinars and Zoom calls. I mean, I'm telling you, I had a hatred for it at the beginning of the pandemic, but I had all these wonderful speaking engagements lined up. And I realized if I didn't embrace teaching and presenting online, I wouldn't have the opportunity to share my message with people. So I think probably the thing I'm most proud of during this time is how I have embraced that type of virtual teaching. And as an educator, I'm all about engaging my audience, my virtual audience. So I've been able to apply what I've known from good, solid instruction to online instruction. And that was my biggest leap in how I pivoted my business. And I think the successful businesses are learning how to do that in their way.
I agree with you 100%. And I think um, great leaders understand you have to stay present, you have to stay relevant,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to stay, and this is one of the pieces of the keeping the stress at bay, you have to stay grounded, because in that place of groundedness is where opportunity and possibility sit. And if you just embrace the stress of the outside world and let that rule you, you cannot be in that place of innovation. So I think what you
Right.
do is so incredibly important.
Yeah, so I like to say you spot your stress. And then I have a method in my book. It's called the SURF method. It has an acronym of SURF. Spot your stress, number 1, because a lot of times people don't even realize that. And the second step, the U in SURF, stands for unleash your options. So when
Mm.
you notice you're feeling stressed about something, then just take a minute, hit the pause button, and stop and ask yourself, okay, this isn't working, but what can I do? This is causing me stress. Well, how can I use the stress and get it working for me? So that's the beginning of my surf method. And I think, as I said before, the stress will always be there. I like to say it is always coming like the waves in the ocean. Stress will always keep coming. And when you're in the ocean, you have choices. You can jump over the wave or dive through the wave. And with your stress, you have choices too. So it's about considering what those choices are.
I love that. And it raises our level of consciousness of to know we always do have choices. And it's a matter of how we choose, how we're choosing to show up to navigate those choices.
Absolutely. I have all of my clients at the beginning of their coaching engagement rate their stress on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being maxed out stress. And then after 6 months or at different intervals, I ask them the question again. I just had a client this morning. She was an 8 at the beginning of our coaching. And after just 6 sessions today, she told me she was down to a 5. And I'm like, yes, that's great, because when you work on this stuff, you really can get better at how you manage your stress. It's really important.
So, what has been some of the challenges in the journey of moving from a school principal into running a business? Let's talk business here for a few
Yes,
minutes.
absolutely. Well, I think one of the first challenges was what was my niche as a coach? Because, there's so many coaches out there and you have to have a way to stand out. And initially, I thought that I would be coaching school leaders, but I was surprised when I couldn't find that many school leaders who wanted to be coached. It really surprised me. They didn't value it. It wasn't part of their world yet at that time, 11 years ago. It is now, more than it was then. And so I guess it was the law of attraction. I just started working with whoever was attracted to me. So my first client was the owner of our local yoga studio. My second client was my hairstylist, who was the owner of the hair salon that I had been going to for a number of years. And so and then I met someone on an airplane who owned several European wax centers. So before you knew it, I had a niche in salons and spas, and it just kind of found me. Um, but that really, it was a little too narrow for me. And I kind of got a little tired of just working in that realm after a while. And then when I was working on my first book, the writing coach I first worked with asked me a very powerful question. He said, "What do you hear from your clients most often?" And I had never really thought about that. But immediately, without missing a beat, I said, "They all tell me how much less stress they have from working with me." And I did not realize until that moment that that was my superpower as a coach. So that was how my first book, Less Stress Business, title was born, and how I kind of shifted my branding to become the Less Stress Coach.
And I love that lesson. It's have you listened to what your clients are saying? And
Absolutely.
it's one of the biggest learning lessons in business is stop listening to what we're saying and listen to what your clients are saying.
Yes. Yeah, that was really a powerful moment for me. And so I know when I advise new coaches, they're always trying to out of the gate to have their niche and be really clear and know who their target client is. And I have a little different perspective on that. I say sometimes it takes some time to figure that all out, and don't push yourself and pressure yourself so much if you don't have it right at the beginning.
So in writing the book Less Stress Life, where did that transcend to that next step or that next level?
Okay, so as you mentioned in the introduction, I've had 3 cancer experiences. The first one was early stage breast cancer in 2001 when I was a school principal. And that's when I began my first journey to figure out how to live with less stress, because that job had completely overtaken my life. So I needed to figure out how, because of my health, that was what really got my attention. In 2014, I was blindsided with a diagnosis of stage 3 melanoma on my scalp. I was in a clinical trial at NYU. I had immunotherapy treatment, and I was cured. And that was
Wow.
I had no idea how serious melanoma is. That was a diagnosis that had a 50-50 survival rate. And then let's jump ahead to 2018. I was experiencing a pain in my ribs, and I had a CAT scan, and my doctor said she saw some spots. and I knew spots were code for cancer. And it turns out that I was diagnosed at that time with metastatic breast cancer that is now in my bones. So I'm 80 chemo treatments for, coming up on 3 years, a little more than 2.5 years. I've been treated for this. And when I first got that diagnosis, honestly, I really didn't think I would be here right now, to tell you the truth. And I just keep taking one day at a time. And so that journey of cancer is what got my attention to really live my life in the present moment with as much joy as possible. And if you're stressed all the time, you're not living with joy. So that's how I kind of got started um, on this journey. And I'm finally there. I am definitely, I mean, even in the face of a terminal diagnosis, I am happier than I've ever been, more joyful, more in the present moment, and less stressed than I've ever been at any time in my life.
And in reality, I mean, one thing this year has taught us is we don't know our end date in this world. What we do know is that we can live every day in joy to the fullest and embrace life.
Absolutely. Yes,
And you
that's,
are an amazing role model and a forever lasting teacher.
thank you, Ivy. Well, what I like to say is stress isn't optional. There will be stress. What is optional is how we choose to handle our stress. And it is a choice.
So, final tips for going into this holiday season for our listeners.
Um, yes, well, I would say just think outside the box a little bit for something new. Rather than, we've touched on this a little bit, but rather than lamenting what you're missing, create a new tradition for this holiday season. And you might be surprised, it might be something that's even better and more meaningful than what you've done in the past. So, yeah, stay focused on something new. And as I said earlier, really focus on what matters for the holiday season. And I'll tell you, one of the things I'm enjoying best about the pandemic is how much time everybody's spending outdoors.
Yeah.
So I would say don't let the weather keep you indoors. We just had a driveway gathering with our family and it was chilly. It's windy where I live and it's getting colder, but it's invigorating to be outside. I love the expression, there's no such thing as bad weather, there's only bad clothing. I don't know who
Love
originally
that.
said that. I love that because, don't let the weather keep you indoors. I think that's one of the things that I hope sticks from the pandemic is that people get outdoors more and live their lives more in the fresh air. And actually, there's a lot of research to say that that can help reduce your stress too. So whether it's a happy hour with your family on one of the holiday days outdoors, maybe you get one of those little freestanding fireplaces so you can gather outside. Figure out a way that you can be outside and get to be with your loved ones.
And I also think it's one thing you said that's really resonating with me is your commitment to doing your weekly video calls with your girlfriends.
Yes. And I've done a lot of things like that since the pandemic. That's one thing. The other thing I did that I highly recommend to people, I reached back in my life to two important mentors that I had. And I wrote them letters to tell them what I appreciated about them. And we reconnected. And these are women in their 90s. So this was so important for them to have heard from me and how I've impacted their lives. And actually, in the upcoming weeks, I'm going to see one of them in person. So I'd say think about people who have touched your life and touched your heart in different ways and reach out to them. There's probably lots of people we can reach out to in our lives that we don't think of on a day-to-day basis.
And listeners, on that note, for those of you who have been staying tuned to her success story through this year, I've been a big proponent of make that list, start reaching out to people, check it twice, expand on it, reach out to some more people. When you say, I don't know what to do today, Pick up the phone and leave somebody a message, even if they don't pick up. Let people hear your voice, know you care. Jamie, you are brilliant. You're a breath of fresh air. You're what every person needs to be listening to, not during just the holiday season, but all year long. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your your busy life, taking a few minutes to join us here at Her Success Story. I truly am touched. I'm touched with our conversation. I'm touched with where you come from and the principles you live by.
Thank you so much, Ivy, for taking time to talk with me today. I am honored to be here and to get to share my story. And I appreciated your questions, which really got me thinking about things that really matter. So thank you for that.
And listeners, if you want to listen to more great interviews, content, and have a place that touches your heart, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. We have new interviews and content coming into your inbox every Monday morning, as well as please leave a message below. Leave a comment. What is your biggest takeaway from listening to Jamie today? What are you taking away? And more, as importantly, what you're going to take forward in your world. This is for all of us to live with less stress, more joy, and more life appreciation. Thank you for joining me here. See you next week on Her Success Story.